This is an Eye on Annapolis bonus podcast.
All right, well, we are sitting here with a new kid on the block, I will say, in one of the older spaces on the block at 49 West. But we are joined this morning by Alderman Harry Huntley, who, for those that aren't aware, was appointed alderman back in September, July. Yeah, at the resignation of former alderwoman Elly Tierney, who moved up to Massachusetts. But we want to really get to know you because I think some of the people in the city, and yes, you are Ward 1, but you are a representative of the city, both here in the city and beyond. And I thought that would be good, and just to find out, who you are and what your deal is. What's your background? I mean, how did we come into Annapolis?
Sure. Well, I mean, my original background is I wanted to be a farmer, believe it or not. It is not my lifelong dream to be on the Annapolis.
Oh, okay, good. So I'm glad we got that out of the system.
Yeah, about 2 years into college studying to be a farmer, I started thinking about, I love doing this. I was working on a farm. I was actually working for the Inn at Little Washington's farm. And I remember having this moment of clarity of, I love this. I could love doing this for 30 years. But boy, doing this when I'm 60 is going to be really, really hard. And also just thinking more about how to be able to have a bigger impact. And so that was how I started working on agriculture policy and getting to work on environmental policy. And so my background, my day job, is that I help governments develop better ways to pay farmers to improve the environment. And that's really a wonderful thing because I think, agriculture and the environment can have something of an adversarial relationship at times. We certainly see that in Sherwin. And my work is all about how do we make this better, faster, more efficient, more cost effective. And that's a much more win-win-win proposition for governments, for taxpayers, for farmers, and for environmentalists.
Interesting. How did you get into politics? I mean, we've gone from farming to policy.
Yeah, to politics.
Well, it's not quite a PPP. It's an FPP.
So it's really just that it goes back to my grandfather, I'd say. My grandfather grew up in public housing projects in Baltimore City. He grew up looking at a burn on the ceiling above him from where the kid who lived in the housing projects above him had died. Really a rough situation. And he grew up and was able to get a good job and raise a family. And his daughters both got master's degrees. And he imparted in all of us that your job is to enjoy life, sure, but to leave the world better than we found it. That is our mission as people. And so I've just always tried to live by that in ways small and big, whether it's picking up a piece of trash on the street or knocking doors for Democrats. And so as opportunities have opened up, I've always just felt an obligation to stand up and say, if nobody else is going to do it, I will. Or if I don't think the people who are standing up and offering to do it are going to do the right job, I will.
Fantastic. Well, you were on the Annapolis Central Democratic.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that because that's like kind of the perfect example there. People ask me, how did I start doing that, right? I had lived in Annapolis for 1 year when I started it. And it comes down to exactly what I just described to you. It was I guess it was about September or August of 2021. And anybody who lives in Ward 1 and remembers that we got a letter that said, we're not even sending you a ballot. Sending everybody a ballot for the general election, but we're not even sending you a ballot because nobody's running against Gavin. Nobody's running against Elly. And that was fine with me. Nobody's running at all for this Annapolis Democratic Central Committee position. And I read the letter and I thought, nobody's running at all for this? Surely I can do better than nobody. So that was how I applied and they asked me to join and I became the treasurer and I tripled the amount of money we had in the bank. And then I became the membership chair and I doubled the membership. And so when Elly resigned, my first thought was, I've been recruiting people to this Central Committee. Let me go to talk to Elly and try and recruit other people, not myself, to run for that Ward 1 seat.
You took the ball and sort of ran with it at that point. And it is very disappointing. I mean, for those that are unaware, the Central Committees are pretty much ignored until they're not.
Oh, I think that's fair.
And what they're tasked with filling vacancies. Or actually they technically, legally, I guess, don't fill the vacancy. I guess the mayor and the council filled your vacancy, but they are the ones that nominate. It's very similar to how the school board used to work with the governor, how it still works with the student member. They put forth the name of the governor makes the appointment. That happens with the judges on their first round and everything else. And they both have Republicans and Democratic Central Committees that are working there, and they're looking for candidates because, let's face it, a well-run municipality has people that are involved. people, as you said, Harry, that are picking up the trash if nobody else will, that are stepping up to fill out a vacancy that will. And, again, let the people decide who it is and on the merits of the candidates. So I laud you for, picking up that mantle and running with it. And, certainly congratulations for, I don't know whether it's considered a run for alderman at that point or just a ability to convince a group of people that you're the right candidate.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. In a way, our city process is really similar to the one that we're seeing play out at the county level right now, right? With the replacement for Senator Elfreth. But I think there's a really important distinction people should be aware of, that in the state legislature, whenever you resign, your position is filled by the Central Committee. So we had a bunch of people who won re-election in 2022 or election, and then immediately resigned to go work for Governor Moore, which is fine, that's their right. But then the Central Committee's appointed people for almost a 4-year term. In the city, it only happens within 15 months of an election. So if somebody resigns 2 years out, then you do have a special election. But in this case, Elly resigned about 15 months out.
Right. And we're not going to get into that. So you've been in this since September 9th. Was it all you expected? Was it nothing you expected?
All I expected and more, John.
What's been your biggest surprise? Aside from, I think you told me before we started recording that you learned that there was a follow-up button on your email.
Yeah, the snooze button on the emails has been really crucial. I got to thank Alderman Savage for that suggestion. The biggest surprise, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that's really come out as I've gotten to meet more people within the ward, I always knew that my neighbors were really amazing, but the more people I meet, I'm constantly impressed by the just level of folks who live in Ward 1. You have CEOs, you have all-star lawyers, you have people who have been former really high-level government officials. Whatever problem needs solved in the city, we have somebody who can solve it. We have an awesome civil engineer who just emailed me the other day and said, this striping in front of my house is not right, and here's why. And she was able to completely lay out, because it's something she does for her job, right, exactly how the striping was not correct and how it should be fixed. So we have this incredible wealth of people in the community, and we need to do a better job of allowing them to invest in their community.
And you are absolutely right. I mean, and it's not just Ward 1, obviously, but it's all across the city. But we do have a wealth of, I don't say intelligence, but a wealth of information that if we're smart about it, we can tap into it. I know
Human capital is how I would put it.
Perfect. You're perfect. And I know back, prior to, we said you've been in Annapolis for about a year, so it was prior to when you came in here when we were having an issue with crime. Ellen Moyer, it may have been Josh Cohen, I can't remember who was the mayor at the time, but tapped into a gentleman that lived on right next to the St. Anne's Parish House. I'm trying to remember the name of the street there. It's Davis Howard Safir, who was the former commissioner for the New York City Police Department and the fire department chief or fire department commissioner. So we had a wealth of that human capital to be able to tap into if we can. And hopefully those folks are engaged enough to be able to call up Harry Huntley and say, hey, this is, the lines are wrong, Harry, and here is exactly why.
Well, and I hope they do, but I also think it's important, we need to make sure that we show people that when the city's doing its job right, or they don't want to invest their own time. I was talking a little while ago about an idea of making it easier for, people to contribute to public park maintenance, be able to have a fund where somebody could say, hey, I love this park, I use it all the time, I want to provide some funding to it. And the more I thought about it, the more I just thought we need to show people that the city's going to do an adequate job of maintaining parks before we start asking people to chip in their own money on it. So there's a role, but people need to have that sense that the city's doing its job before they're willing to jump in and invest their own expertise as well.
Let's slide a little bit into Ward 1. I mean, that's where your focus is. Absolutely. I'm sure that if I run into you in the Giant on Forest Drive, anybody that's there can, grab your ear and squawk at you or praise you or whatever it may be.
Or at 49 West. That's where it happens.
Well, that's all in Ward 1. I mean, I'm saying you could be at Growls in Ward 2 and same thing. What are the biggest issues that you're seeing? I mean, you're saying you're out there and you're meeting all sorts of great people. What are they concerned about? What are they excited about? What gets Ward 1 excited?
The number one thing that I hear about is parking. And
oh my God, no, really?
Oh, I'm so serious. Yeah. And, I think a lot of people feel very frustrated that they're not even being heard on it. There's so much where the a lot of it comes down to the city has these agreements that in a lot of ways tie its hands. And so people feel like the city just been dismissing them and saying, oh no, like we can't do anything about this. And that is not the approach I've taken at all. It has been, I'll tell you exactly where my hands are tied, but I'm going to listen to you first. And then if going back to this point of human capital, we have some of the best lawyers in the whole state here. We have people who work on some of these exact issues. So if we can at least start off with making sure folks feel heard and then being able to bring in their own expertise. I have people who have come to me with the contract for our parking redlined. They'll come in and say, I think you can do something this in this place and this place and that place. And it is a really thorny problem. There is not a ton of options at this point. But our citizens deserve to know that their representatives are listening and that they are working with them to try and find solutions where we can.
Count with me. I mean, we have so many different parking. Okay, the city maintains parking in citywide in parts of the city. That's the city's people. Like that doesn't have zone parking or meter parking or something out in Ward 7 or 5 or something like that. So that falls under the city's thing. The garages, we have premium parking. We also have Metropolis, which is over here at God's Court. We also have Parkmobile, which is SP Plus, which used to be the contractor that still is for some of them.
Well, SP Plus got bought by Metropolis. And I think this is actually really exciting because what we've seen, so this is where I can say we've actually made some progress on parking. There's a heck of a lot more progress to go. But one of the big things has been upgrading Knighton and Gott's garages to the way that they really were always supposed to be. So they are now truly drive in, drive out. The first time you go in, and actually Park Place is this way now too. The first time you drive in, if you haven't used the system before, you give them 3 numbers: your phone number, your credit card number, and your license plate number. Every time after that, all you have to do is drive in, drive out, and you get automatically charged. Now, the next question is, how do we get Hillman to that? And literally just last night, I was talking with our law office about that because, again, there's a relatively narrow lane that the city can adjust our agreements. So we have to get very creative about it.
Because Hillman is now out of the city's hands essentially for 30 years. I mean, there are ways that we can massage it a little bit and do it, but it's out of the city's hands for 30 years. And that was part of the concession agreement to put money towards City Dock, ultimately do that. And I will say that getting into this garage is fantastic.
Good. Glad you hear you liked it.
In and out, I was just right in there. You know, the issue is that, we've got to try to figure out how to get the resident parking and stuff like that.
Right. So it's almost like, as I see it, it's almost 3 issues. It is the garages. It is the street parking that you're paying for. That's like the Park Mobile. And then it's the resident parking. And in particular with the resident parking, the issue is concentrated in residential parking districts 1 and 2, where, our hands are limited on what we can do about it. But also the terms, I think, and I'm not speaking for the city here, but I'm speaking for myself. I think that the terms of that agreement are not being met by the vendor. Just to be really straightforward, one of the terms is that the parts of the residential parking districts 1 and 2 have to be patrolled every 4 hours. And so when there's a violation, and I get these multiple times a week, when there's a violation that is so blatant and it sits there for days, how can you possibly say that it's getting patrolled every 4 hours? Collecting those, and I'd encourage anybody listening to send me examples as they have them and send them to our transportation committee chair, Alderman O'Neill, because that allows us to say, look, you're not even meeting the bare minimum of your contract.
You can hold them to the fire there. I mean, if I made that deal, I mean, I've got to make my money back in 20 and 30 years. So, I mean, that's where my focus is going to be. Sure. As a business person there.
But how can we be creative about it, right? So, I mean, there's no reason that we couldn't have a system like we have at Knighton and Gott's garages in Hillman, still be able to make that money back. And maybe even more because you would get better participation. You have more people showing up. I hear we were talking before about former Mayor Ellen Moyer, and she crystallized it so well. She said, Annapolis is the capital city. We have to be welcoming. And that's what it comes down to me. We have to be welcoming. We have to make it easy.
She's absolutely right. Yeah, I love Ellen. Ellen's great.
Yeah, she said that to me right in 49 West.
Here's a criticism on Gott's as well. As we look right down the alley toward it for you, maybe you can get this as the elevators in the building have been broken for coming on a decade, I'm thinking. You were probably still in college. As you said, you need to give them a credit card number, your license plate number, stuff like that. And I don't know my license plate number, but you don't know that I mean, it said there's little signs that say, oh, make sure you write down your license plate number because we don't have any cell service in the garage.
Yeah, we were just on Wednesday at the Transportation Committee meeting, because I'm not on the Transportation Committee, but because, as I said, this is the number one issue, I make sure to join a lot of those meetings. And just Wednesday, we were talking with the vendor about how we get that cell service. Because, yeah, that's not just a problem for knowing your license plate, but that's a safety issue.
Sure.
So we were talking about a couple different options of, could we put in signal boosters? Could we have like dedicated phones, at least for the safety issue?
All boxes like you see on college campuses.
That's exactly how we were talking about it. Yeah. So the issue, of course, is who's going to pay for that? And the signal boosters are particularly expensive. So that's something we could explore in the budget, but it's, is that the highest and best use of taxpayer dollars?
Well, my suggestion would be put more signage down on the lower levels to make people aware that they need to get that information to get up if they've never parked in the garage before, so they can scan that QR code on the signboard as they come out. That's my non-Ward 1 resident recommendation.
Signage is generally one of the easier things to get done. So
totally off topic, but another thing that the city probably should be aware of. I mean, I know Anthony Brown has been warning of it. QR codes have become ubiquitous where we're now ordering off of menus, which I hate. But thank you.
Meal.
People are now printing out QR codes, nefarious ones, and stickering them over signs.
I have not seen them stuck over signs. You see them like you go to the gas station and people just stick them up on the pump.
Right.
But I've not seen them put on over another app.
I have not seen it myself, but I've read several stories where they do it. And actually, I think the first time I ever heard it was like there was a visitors bureau in some city that put the QR codes and visit our lovely city on their street poles, and a local restaurant put stickers over theirs that says "Eat at Luigi's." I guess Luigi's is probably not the right word to use at this point, but eat at Joe's.
Well, I'll trust none of our business owners to do that specifically, but you could really see that being concerned in the parking garages where you're asking somebody to put in their license plate number or their credit card number.
Right, through the QR code. So they do recommend that what you do is you just sort of rub the sign to make sure it's not a sticker, to make sure it's it's printed and screened on there, which is kind of crazy that we're living in a world that we need to do this. And every time we turn around, there's somebody looking to scam you or whatever.
You want to talk about signage for parking? We realized recently that some of the signs downtown say permit parking only. They're missing an R. I don't know how long they've been like that, but finally a resident pointed it out to me, and now the signs are on order. They're going to get replaced. But boy, to me, that's embarrassing that we would have typos on our signs downtown. It's really incredible just how our brains work that way, that you can see something every day, and partially because you're seeing it every day, you don't notice that it's not.
Well, they say that you can, you see those things online where they take out all the vowels or something like that, and you can read an entire paragraph without anything. And I've seen a number of school zones where they get the painted on the road where the stencil is backwards and the N is backwards.
Oh yeah, I've seen your picture of that too.
I get that. But we were talking about parking is the number one concern. What else? What follows there?
Yeah. Well, I think people are really excited about the city dock road development. One of the things I say is, to me, the most important parts of it are unpaving Paradise and preserving them for posterity, right? The resilience parts. Everybody agrees that we need to get these resilience parts done ASAP. Even there was a meeting, actually the first meeting that I attended after getting chosen, but even before getting sworn in, was a meeting about the city dock project. And there was a whole listening session. You heard this over and over again. Even folks who feel really strongly in opposition to some parts would agree we need the resilience parts done. And so to me, I think having somebody who wakes up every day and as part of his day job is thinking about how do we get environmentally positive projects done faster, done more cost effectively, that's exactly what you want in this job. And so even just this week, I was talking with one of my colleagues. So I work at the Environmental Policy Innovation Center. We're all about how do we make environmentally positive projects happen faster. That's about permitting. That's about bringing in more private investment. So I actually have one of my colleagues who just finished working in the Secretary of Transportation's office, the U.S. Secretary, and was able to get her connected with our city staff because she is a real expert on resilience projects and being able to get them done and get them through this environmental review process. So I think having that is one of the biggest things that I bring to the table is the ability to get these environmentally positive projects done faster and more cost effectively.
What I've heard and what I'm hearing is I've not heard anyone say this is a horrible project, it shouldn't be done. We're hearing a little bit of grumblings on the the center down at the end, and that's to be expected. I mean, when they redid the police station, they heard the grumblings too and everything else. I mean, that's fine. I mean, what I'm hearing that a lot of the concern is transparency, which is just such a huge buzzword in all levels of government, is that, is the money there? Is the money coming at the right here, right now, right today? If that job was going to be able to start at 9 o'clock this morning and be done at 5 o'clock this morning, and the bill needed to be paid by 6 p.m. tonight, can we pay it? No. Right. That's one of the things that I keep hearing that we need to make sure that is. I mean, would we be able to at 6 o'clock tonight say this will be paid next month?
One of the things that I talk with people about all the time, so we have the vast majority of the project for the city dock funding has been awarded and allocated. I mean, I think it's 94% last I looked. Now, a huge chunk of that is the FEMA money, which we have been awarded. It's not as though like we're still applying for the grant, but we have to complete this federal environmental review process. And again, this is something that I deal with all the time in my day job.
And that's just a box that needs to be checked off.
Well, I wish it's not that.
Yeah, yes.
And one of the things,
there's a bean counter, the guy that's holding the check in FEMA that needs to see the box that was done to pass.
One of the things that I tell people about with this all the time is you hear environmental review, and me as an environmentalist, I want an environmental review. I want to make sure that our projects, especially projects funded by the federal government, are being environmentally positive. But this federal environmental review process, even environmentalists will tell you, is fundamentally broken. And the best example of that is every year we have tens or hundreds of thousands of acres of forest across the United States that burns to the ground while waiting on the environmental review for the management that would prevent it from burning down. And that's exactly the same situation we're at here, where the tide is rising and we're waiting around to get this environmental review process done to see if we're allowed to preserve our environment.
And in the meantime, Pip's Dock Street Dogs is closed for another 2 days because they flooded out.
Yeah, or Storm Brothers, or any number of folks.
Well, Sven's got it down, man. I mean, I don't, that's not the right answer, but I mean, when a storm's coming, Sven knows exactly what to do. And
I talk to Sven a lot, and he is. I want to get to a point where he can be one of the biggest champions for this, but because to your other point about transparency, he is not one of the biggest champions, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that, but he feels like the city needs to be more straightforward about the management of the current pumps that we have down there. And until he sees that, I don't think he's a full believer that we're going to be able to adequately do a new pump system. And I can't really fault him for that.
And that's fair. I mean, I wrote an editorial a couple months ago and sort of going back to what you talked to somebody that was giving you a hard time about the paint on the road and funding parks and stuff like that. And the city, I said is notorious for not maintaining a lot of what they have, and they go out, they buy the Rolls Royce, but they never change the oil. Was the thing that I used. And we look at and I realize that and I think it's dead now at this point. But Main Street was never rebricked at one point because they were going to put sprinklers in all the second stories of the thing. That's why that initial strip of asphalt was in there, but then the bricks started going out. And I mean, okay, it was a bad contract to get bad bricks and bad base and everything else, so it needed to be replaced. And then it was like, oh, we're not going to replace it until after Hillman's rebuilt. And now it's after City Dock. And you look at, Eastport was deteriorating a little bit on a lot of things until Bumper Moyer jumped in. And now he's doing a great job, and the people love to do it. They ought to get out and be part of the community. But again, as somebody that's living here, and we've got to look at our residents that are changing. Okay, I mean, we're getting more high-income people, more fancy houses. It's getting, more and more challenging to afford to live here. And then, I would think that if, we'll say Paul Prager, who owns like half of Easton, were to move down here, he would expect that curb to be painted, and he would expect not to be out there on a Friday night painting it.
Well, I don't quite agree that we're buying the Rolls Royce and not changing the oil. I'd say it's more like we're buying the Volkswagen and running the tires too long. So it's like, yes, I agree with your fundamental premise, maybe not quite so extreme. But the easiest way to look at that is I think we need to, right now our operating budget for FY25 was $190 million. Our capital budget was $60 million.
Right.
And I think we need to refocus, shift. We just need to shift some of that focus to be about maintenance. I really agree with you. Like, it can't always be about getting the new thing, not maintaining the thing we have. Right. So a good example of that is our parks, right? And was just down at Amos Garrett Park a week and a half ago where we had an erosion issue. City came down and put down some netting to help with that. And that was good. But then once the netting started to come up, it was sitting there and it was catching turtles. And so when somebody came to me and said, turtles are getting caught in this, I said, no, I'm just going to go do it. So we need somebody who's willing to say, I'm just going to go show up and do it also. I had somebody say to me about a sign that got left up after College Avenue reopened, but the sign said College Ave was closed. And he emailed me and it was like 11 o'clock at night. It was raining. I said, this is something I can do in 15 minutes. So I went out and I took down the sign. Right. And, there's a lot more to city government than just that. But I think that's an integral part of what people want to see out of their representatives.
Well, it is. I mean, I go back to the old story about William Donald Schaefer when he was mayor of Baltimore. And I'm going to really paraphrase it, but he was being driven to work or something like that. And on probably one of the very first cell phones that, they had, he said he'd call up one of his department heads and says, hey, Mrs. Smith called and said she has a pothole in front of her place. I says, okay, sir, I'll get right to it. He said, what's the address? That's not my damn job to figure out. You figure it out and fill the pothole. And I mean, I think that when you look into a small city, and I mean, we are a small city, and we are 40,000 people.
And we should, it's fine to grow, but we want to be a small city.
Oh, absolutely. But I think that, it's instead of the bigger pictures, I mean, we want the pothole spill. We want the science thing. We want to make it, we want to be safe. We want to be, the whole 9 yards. And I think that, sometimes municipalities, and I'm not picking on Annapolis, but any of them sort of forget that the core needs of the people that live and visit here. And I mean, visitors here are huge. I mean, the Naval Academy is very self-sustaining. Yeah. And they can and do whatever they want. Hence their alumni center that was built in a heartbeat.
I won't comment.
Well, no, I mean, it was federal land. They can sit there and do what they want. I mean, you talk to any number of businesses in the city and we're like, hey, we wanted to put an awning up. They said, we're going on year 4.
Yeah. 4 months for Middleton Tavern to get a permit to repaint their letters the same color. 4 months.
Yeah. It's, that's frustrating. And I remember when Mayor Buckley had run for office, he said he was going to take one of the vacant stores on Main Street and put a permanent countdown clock in the window. And that never happened. We got a bike lane instead that went
I
along.
love that idea of the permanent countdown clock. And that is, so gosh, I got a lot of points to say in response to that. But on the permitting side, absolutely agree. And I think one of the big things that the mayor will tell you is having a rapid succession, let's call it, of planning and zoning directors did not help with that. We've 4 in the last 7 years. The one we have is here to stay. And he's been clear, but also I've been clear to him that just the measurement of our permits, and we were literally just revealing this on Monday morning in the audit committee, being able to have clear metrics for how quickly permits get issued and measuring those is crucial. Let's put it down. That is a good idea to put it red in the storefront.
Well, it was funny. The place on Forest Drive, the affordable housing that's going up right next to the American Legion.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And it was funny. I mean, I was talking with some people and we were talking about, my gosh, they're going up so fast. I said, yeah, they're afraid the city might change their mind.
Well, I want to go back to something you said before about the core functions of city government, because look, well, I guess it was maybe last week or a week and a half ago, I got an email that with 2 words nobody wants to hear: emergency and sewer. Nobody wants it 2 words to be in the same sentence. And we had an issue on King George Street, and the Department of Public Works really got right to work on it and is already making those repairs. But I think, to your point about how do we address those key functions of city government, to me, it's 3 parts. It is a short-term, medium-term, long-term. The short-term is having better communication with city residents and that kind of, let's just make it happen, right? Jumping out on those things when I can. And the medium-term is rebalancing our budget a little bit more towards maintenance. Good example of this, we have $600,000 budgeted in this year for replacement of our brick sidewalks, right? You know how much it takes to replace one side of one block of brick sidewalk? $120,000. So we're replacing 2.5 blocks of brick sidewalk per year? That's crazy. So that's a good example where we need to just rebalance our budget a little bit. But then the 3rd part is we need to be smart about our land use. And in fact, in Ward 1, we are. In Ward 1, if we look at the city got done something called a land value study, which was really helpful. And what it shows is that 23% of the city by land area provides more in property taxes than it costs to maintain its infrastructure. And that is overwhelmingly Ward 1. That is pretty much all of Ward 1. But that other 77%, because of the type of land use that has been mandated, it's generally it's costing more to maintain an infrastructure cost than is bringing in a revenue. So I'm not saying we need the heavy hand of government to come down and require a bunch of townhouses get built, but we should stop making it illegal for the kinds of land use that we know is smart, is more revenue positive in the rest of the city. Again, in Ward 1 and in parts of Eastport, we're doing a really good job on it. But the rest of the city, we need to just allow that same kind of development to happen. That makes sense. And that will make our city budget a lot stronger in the long run. We'll be able to have better services, stronger infrastructure, more resilient city if we can better use our land.
And we are going to be talking again in probably a couple months, unfortunately.
Good. I'll probably
We're talking about the election that's going to be coming up. I haven't quite figured out what I want to do with that, but I'm kind of excited because there's an awful lot of interest in the election. I mean, yeah, you have been in office for 3 months, and I know that you have already drawn 3, I believe, their primary challenges, which is unusual. I mean, you would figure I'm going to let somebody go on the other side. I'll challenge that. That's all right. I'm very excited about that. And I've heard that there's going to be primary challengers in other races as well. And I think that's just so good and robust. So
it is. It's really good for the city.
Why do you think now we're seeing this interest? Okay, I mean, you showed an interest to get into the central committee, and then subsequently showed an interest that, hey, this is something I can do. This is something I want to do. We've had some people that have been on council just forever. And I think that there are some people that could probably just sit there and just have their name on it and continue to be there forever. And that's not unique to Annapolis by any means. I mean, that's personally, as a resident of the city, I am very enthused, very excited when I see somebody like you that's young, that's energetic, that has fresh ideas. Thank you. That is taking an interest in the city. And I will, I'll count Dewan into there. I'll count Karma in there, Rob Savage to a degree. And, I remember I talked to one person who said that the city and a lot of government is stuck on no.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was like, hey, I'd like to do no. Well, this is the way that, no. No. And this is the way it's always been done. And that's what the young people are going to change up and they're going to shake up. And that's what I'm really excited about. Because
so you're talking about elections. I'll say this is tentative. My tentative campaign slogan is let's make it happen. Because when somebody calls me up, I don't want to say no. I want to be able to say, let's make it happen. Whether that is that we actually need to change legislation, or whether it's they need somebody to come down in the park and cut out the netting that the turtles are getting stuck in. We should be able to move beyond that just instinctual no, but it comes down to incentives. So this is, again, something I deal with all the time in my day job. If I'm trying to go to USDA and say, here's a better way of paying a farmer, that the farmer will like better, that the environmentalists will like better, but there's an incentive against trying something new. And this just is, to some extent, inherent to bureaucracies, but I also think we can change it with culture and with processes. And I'm going to talk at the federal level here. Nobody gets fired for not trying the new idea, right? You, generally speaking, in the Federal Civil Service are not getting fired for not achieving the goal. You're getting fired if you try something new and you get hauled in front of a congressional committee, or your boss gets hauled in front of a congressional committee because that thing didn't work out. So we need a little bit more tolerance for risk. We need a little bit more of a permission structure for our city employees to be able to try new things. And I think we're just barely starting to turn the corner on that. I point to our DPW director as really having a culture of being willing to try new things. But I completely agree with what you're saying. We need to change that culture.
A little bit of that, Joe. I know during COVID, I know there was a bus driver that had come up with a shield.
Yeah.
And the city allowed that and embraced it and everything else. And that's just wonderful to be able to, and maybe there should be a way to incentivize employees, because some of the best ideas are going to come from within. Definitely not necessarily the elected talking heads that sit at on the council chambers every night, but there's a guy that's driving the bus, or the guy that's sweeping the street, the guy that the woman that's handling the cashiers in the finance office.
And I make a point when I'm just out, like if I go to Pitt Moyer, or if I'm down when City Dock is flooding, I'm talking to the guys who are working with the pumps, of talking to those employees and asking them for their opinions. I also think the other thing we can really straightforwardly do is use the audit committee and the city's metrics and outcomes that we're setting. And so then it becomes a little bit more of, are you actually meeting your outcomes that you have set? So go back to our planning and zoning discussion and permit. If we are really managing based off of an outcome of how quickly are these permits getting approved, then if we focus, here's how I say it for farmers. If you can tell a farmer where to go rather than how to get there, they're going to find a better route. And I think that's true of our city employees too.
Question for you. I'll put you on the spot. What have been some of the successes of the administration?
Oh, I think there are definitely some significant ones. So a lot of it,
Please don't say the bike lane.
I won't say that bike lane, but I do think a move in our comprehensive plan to making it clear that mobility and transportation is a priority for the city. That I would call that a big success. I think also this idea of we're going to build a city for people who want to live in a city. That's something that, the mayor really enjoys, being in a city. He does not want to live in the suburbs. And I think most people who live in Annapolis feel that way. So making it clear that the point of government is to build a government, or the point of the city administration is to build a government for people who want to live in a city, that to me is a big success. And while we don't quite have shovels in the ground, the city dock project is going to be a big success. Oh, another one, here's maybe the most concrete one I can point to. The building of Hillman came in under budget.
Exactly.
And ahead of schedule.
I'm not sure it went under budget because that came through COVID. I mean, from the initial estimates, but
certainly ahead of schedule, and has won awards for its design.
I mean, that's something that the mayor can go bump his chest on for quite a long time.
But the management of it needs some improvement, and that's something that, like I said, we just had the management of it in front of the city council, the transportation committee on Wednesday, and we're paying really close attention to it.
What is the slip up? Please don't tell me that the administration has been perfect, and here's your chance to say the bike lane was.
No, I mean, I think one of the big things,
You're easy on him.
No, I'm going. We're just talking about you.
The question I just got asked.
He would love me a long time ago, but he usually gets a lot more clicks if he does it.
The question I just got asked was, what are some of the slip-ups of the administration?
Mayor Buckley, what would you consider, as you're getting down into the sunset of your administration, what would you consider would be a slip up of your administration?
I didn't deliver on the Ferris wheel. That was a big one.
I think one that I was going to say is that we were talking earlier about the permitting process and making that faster. And it is something that there's still a lot of work to do, partially because we have had that rapid change of planning and zoning directors. But we are setting clear metrics on what it should be. And our new planning and zoning director is awesome. And he is here to stay. And I do think he's going to make improvements in that.
Yeah. We didn't see the storefront with the countdown clock on permits.
I like that idea. I hadn't heard that before.
If you ask me what I didn't deliver on, and I think we're going to deliver on most things, or they'll be in motion, but we didn't deliver on planning and zoning. And that's because we've had 5 directors in 7 years. And then we got a new software system that didn't deliver. It's not been effective. So we've had a lot of slip-ups, but we have a real problem solver there in Chris Jakubiak. And because he came from the private sector, because he's not, been in politics or in government his whole life, I think that's been really effective on the approach that he's taken, but still going to take time. So I would say that's what we really haven't delivered on yet.
Just out of curiosity, what would you say is your biggest successes?
Oh, I think,
and we got to sit down and talk before we get out of
I hope we get a big interview on the way out. Yeah, no, I think we've made the city more inclusive. We've brought on, done more infrastructure. It's done infrastructure to historic levels. We've got a city with its best financial rating that it's ever had. We've brought on more green space and public space and water access than any mayor in history. So I think we've, as a council, have done a lot, but I'd love to sit down with you and talk about a lot of those things.
Absolutely. When we were talking, we were saying, Hillman is absolutely something that you should be running down the street, thumping your chest on.
Yeah. And speaking as the chair of the finance committee, I think that point Kevin just made is really underrated, how much the city's finances have improved. When he came in, we were staring down some big deficits, and things really have, having the financial rating improve. It's not something that is visible, but it really does impact residents' lives through what is our bond rating, and thus what rate can we borrow at, and thus how we can maintain that infrastructure or build new infrastructure.
One tax increase in 8 years, and I'll stand behind that tax increase because someone has to be the grown up, right? Things go up. Things increase in rice, and labor's gone up, and materials have gone up, everything has gone up. But to only really have to effectively do one, I think, I'll stand by that.
Well, you did that now we're getting into Mayor Buckley and everybody. You did that your first year. And, you were able to hold it down through COVID, through everything else, which is admirable.
I think we led through a lot. We led through mass shootings too. We led through COVID. We led through what was the greatest downturn in the world economy since the Great Depression. So I think we led through some hard things here.
Well, there you go. We heard it from Alderman Harry Huntley as well as the mayor. It was sort of just popped in here to 49 West.
That's Annapolis for you. You can meet anybody at 49 West.
It's so funny. I was at Heroes one time back when Mayor Cohen was the mayor, and he bowled in one weekend, and I was there with a friend, and I introduced him as Josh, and somebody's like, is that like the mayor? And I'm like, well, yeah. I said in a professional type of a thing, I would say, introduce, this is Mayor Cohen, or this is Mayor Buckley, in a bar in West Annapolis, eating a plate of wings. No, that's Josh, which is one of the nice things about being a small city and being a small city.
Yeah, I find that even on the council. When am I saying Dewan versus when am I saying Alderman Gay? And, it's definitely happened before that I'll be in a committee meeting and slip up and say, Dewan, what do you think about this? Alderman Gay, what do you think about this?
As we wrap up, though, Harry, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you and keep in touch with you?
It's such a good question. So I do want to plug a couple things. First of all, sign up for my newsletter. I hear from folks all the time how much they appreciated Elly's newsletter, and they say to me, why don't you do something like that? Well, I do. Every other week, right before the council meeting, I send out a newsletter with all my thoughts on what we're going to be voting on and other stuff to know around the ward. You can go to harrymhuntley.com and sign up for that. The other thing is right now, through the winter, I'm doing a coffee shop tour. So every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., I'm at a different coffee shop throughout the ward. So I hope folks will come by for that. And there's more information about that on the website as well.
Well, I will say that the newsletters are very, very informative. They're very good to have. I will also say I'm not a fan of necessarily increasing the budget, but I would love to see a position or two as assistants to a council member, because let's face it, I mean, you blow through that $700,000 salary in a heartbeat that you guys did. No, that was a joke for those that are listening. I mean, the council, you're what, 14,000 or
something? Something like that. I'm pretty sure I'm losing money on this job between the amount of coffees that I get.
Undoubtedly. But I would love to see the city find a way of the budget to put an assistant to all of the council. I mean, I know that you guys are looking for your own independent counsel, lawyer counsel, but to have somebody to turn around and be able to help coordinate your newsletter.
Yeah.
For all the, and I think I'm a fan of consistency. So I would love to see your newsletter look exactly like Ross's newsletter, like Dewan's newsletter to look like Rob's,
Yeah, I was just talking with the finance committee about this the other day. And one of the things that I would like to see is if we can, I don't know that we even necessarily need to add a position, but I think if we can maybe find some of the positions that are already doing constituent services work and then regroup them into the city council. And even less than having 8, I think if we could have 4 so that so say Karma and I can share one, and Ward 7 and 8 could share one. The ones that has some similarities, because I agree with you. It is, I work 80 hours a week. I cannot, if you asked me at the very beginning, what is something that surprised me about this? I knew it was going to be a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and it should be. But having somebody to help with some of the stuff that should be a little more consistent, that would make me be able to be more effective at the stuff that you really want council people doing.
It was funny. The last time the elections rolled around, and Jared Littman was not running, because I had known how much time he had spent, and he brought in Mark Rodriguez and all the whole 9 yards, and I knew how much time he spent doing city work as opposed to hardware work.
Yeah.
And it was, he was probably at times in excess of 50 hours a week between the meetings and everything else, just on city work, in addition to this everything. And one of the questions I asked all of the candidates is, how much time are you thinking you're going to need to devote to aldermanicking? And they range from, outside of the 8 meetings a month, probably 3-4 hours. okay. And I try to keep a straight face. I was like, okay, fine. And that, to me, said, well, you haven't really looked into this deal a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'll leave you with this, John. So I got married in July 6th, and married the woman who I've been dating since I was a teenager. And we got married at Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So beginning in July, that happened. Right when we get back from our honeymoon is when people started calling me to ask me to do this position. And so I'll tell you, the advice that nobody gives you on your wedding day is, hey, as soon as you get back from your honeymoon, make sure you run for political office. Nobody gives you that advice, believe it or not.
wonder why. HarryMHuntley.com is where you want to go to sign up for the newsletter. I do recommend anybody do it. And it's not just Ward 1 people, it's anybody. So you will see what he's thinking. So then you can get back to him and go, what the hell are you thinking? Or you can say good job or whatnot, because, you are voting on citywide issues as well as what's happening in Ward 1. But I want to thank you so much for your time this morning here at 49 West. Congratulations on the election swearing in, and best of luck in the election that is coming up in 25, and we will be definitely back in touch.
Thank you very much, John. I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk.
This has been a bonus podcast from Eye on Annapolis. Please visit us at eyeonannapolis.net. Follow us on Facebook at All Annapolis and on Twitter at Eye on Annapolis. And if you haven't subscribed to the Daily News Brief podcast, go for it. And all of your local news will be delivered to your phone, tablet, or smart device by 6 a.m. every Monday through Friday.